What if Antarctica was mapped before anyone could see it? Not in the future, not with satellites, but centuries ago. What if a piece of paper, drawn when cannons were new and the world was still full of blank space, seems to show a coastline that should have been buried under ice for thousands of years? Then one question follows you like footsteps in a silent hallway. Who mapped Antarctica before it was frozen? In 1929, workers at the Topkapı Palace in Istanbul found something folded and forgotten inside the Ottoman archives. It was a partial world map drawn in 1513 by an admiral named Piri Reis. The map is beautiful. It has sea monsters and ships. It shows the Atlantic, parts of Europe and Africa, and a long stretch of land on the southern edge. And that southern edge is where the puzzle starts. Because some people looked at that coastline and thought it looked like Antarctica. Not just some unknown southern land. Not a vague blob labeled "Here be dragons," but something with curves that seem to match real geography. And if that's true, it's impossible. Antarctica was not officially sighted until the early 1800s, and the interior coastline is hidden under ice that's, in places, kilometers thick. So you begin to build a hypothesis, one step at a time, like you're assembling a machine you're not sure you want to turn on. First fact, Piri Reis didn't claim he invented the map from nothing. He wrote notes on it. He said he compiled it from older sources. Some were Portuguese maps, some were Arabic. And most intriguingly, he mentioned maps drawn in the time of Alexander, which people usually interpret as ancient Greek-era knowledge, not literally Alexander's personal cartography. The point is, he believed he was copying fragments of something older. Second fact, the Piri Reis map is surprisingly accurate in parts. The coast of West Africa is recognizable. The outline of South America is rough but not random. For 1513, it's not a fantasy. It's the work of someone who had access to real navigational information. That makes you wonder, if some parts are grounded, why not the strange southern part too? Third fact, Europeans were obsessed with the idea of a great southern continent long before Antarctica was confirmed. They called it Terra Australis. It was partly a philosophical guess. If there is land in the north, maybe there must be land in the south to balance the Earth. Maps from the 1500s and 1600s often include huge southern landmasses that don't exist. But the Piri Reis coastline doesn't look like a generic blob. It looks specific. And then comes the spark that turns curiosity into obsession. In the mid-20th century, writers began claiming the southern coast on the Piri Reis map matches Antarctica, even showing parts of the coastline before the ice. The idea spreads because it hits every pressure point in the human mind. Lost civilizations, forbidden knowledge, ancient science that modern people forgot, a whisper that history has holes in it. So you zoom in mentally. You trace the line with your imagination, you compare it to modern maps, and you start finding coincidences. The coastline curves the way you expect a continent to curve. There are bays and points. It isn't just a straight line of ignorance. Some argue it resembles Queen Maud Land, the part of Antarctica facing Africa. Others claim it lines up with the Antarctic Peninsula, almost like someone had a view we weren't supposed to have. Then you learn something that makes the puzzle feel even stranger. Mapping longitude accurately at sea was incredibly difficult in 1513. Latitude is easier. You can estimate it by the stars. Longitude requires precise timekeeping. Marine chronometers didn't arrive until the 1700s, yet the map has proportions that in places look like they're based on measurements rather than myths. And that opens a dangerous door. Because if the map contains information that seems too good, you start asking how. Did Piri Reis have access to unknown Portuguese charts? Did the Portuguese have access to something else? Did someone, somewhere, chart coastlines using methods we don't credit them for? The more you investigate, the stranger it gets, because this isn't just about one map. There are other Antarctica before Antarctica claims attached to other old maps. The Oronce Finé map from 1531, the Mercator map from 1569, and especially the 1737 map by Philippe Buache, which shows a southern continent with channels that some people later compared to subglacial features. These maps became a constellation of hints. Not proof, hints. Enough to make you feel like you're standing in a museum at night, staring at paintings that might be looking back. And then the story starts connecting fields. Cartography becomes archaeology. Archaeology becomes climatology. Climatology becomes deep time. Because Antarctica has not always been the frozen fortress, you know. Scientists have found fossils, ancient plants, evidence of forests, and signs that Antarctica was once warmer. The continent split from other landmasses as plate tectonics rearranged Earth. It drifted toward the South Pole. Ocean currents changed. The Antarctic circumpolar current formed and helped isolate it, cooling it further. Ice sheets grew and shrank over millions of years. So now you're tempted to ask a thrilling question. Could there have been a time, long ago, when parts of Antarctica were ice-free enough for humans, or someone, to map them? But the timeline fights back. Modern humans are around 300,000 years old. Complex seafaring civilizations, as far as evidence shows, are very recent, thousands of years, not tens of thousands. The idea of people mapping Antarctica in a warm period starts colliding with what we know about human history. Unless you invoke something bigger, a lost civilization, a forgotten global culture, an ancient mapping tradition passed down like a relay baton through disasters. This is where the Piri Reis puzzle usually slides into the orbit of famous alternative history arguments. The best-known promoter was Charles Hapgood, who in the 1960s wrote about ancient maps and proposed that they preserved knowledge from a sophisticated prehistoric civilization. Hapgood also proposed a controversial idea called Earth crustal displacement, suggesting the Earth's crust could shift rapidly, moving continents to new latitudes. Albert Einstein wrote a short foreword to one of Hapgood's books, praising curiosity but not endorsing the theory as established science. That association alone made the story radioactive in the best way, official-looking but not official. Hapgood and others argued that the Piri Reis map, and a few like it, were copied from older source maps with surprising accuracy. They suggested Antarctica might have been mapped when it was not fully iced over. Then the maps were fragmented, miscopied, rotated, and reassembled across centuries. It's a powerful narrative. It has an internal logic, and you can feel it tugging at you because it explains the weirdness cleanly. But then you reach the part of the investigation where the light changes, where the same facts can be read in a different way. And most experts do. Here's the twist. The dominant scientific explanation is that the Piri Reis map does not show Antarctica at all. Most historians of cartography interpret the southern coastline as a distorted extension of South America, plus a speculative southern landmass, Terra Australis, drawn in a style common for the time. Early maps often stretched coastlines, merged separate lands, and filled unknown spaces with expected geography. When information was incomplete, mapmakers smoothed gaps with imagination. And there's a practical reason the Antarctica claim struggles. The Piri Reis map is only a fragment. It's missing sections. The projection is not straightforward. Comparing it to a modern globe is tricky because small distortions become huge when you're forcing a match. If you already believe it's Antarctica, your brain starts solving the puzzle in that direction. It rotates. It scales. It forgives errors. It finds a coastline because it wants to find one. There's also the ice problem. The idea that the map shows Antarctica, before it was frozen, clashes with what glaciology and geology say about the ice sheet. While Antarctica's ice has fluctuated, the East Antarctic ice sheet is extremely old, on the order of tens of millions of years. Parts of West Antarctica are more dynamic, but not in a way that conveniently creates a recent, fully ice-free coastline for ancient human surveyors to chart and then pass down. And about those other maps, the Oronce Finé and Mercator southern continents are now mostly understood as theoretical. Buache's map is sometimes cited because it resembles features under the ice, but Buache was working with 18th century ideas about geography, including hypotheses about sea passages. Similarity isn't automatically knowledge. Sometimes it's the shape of human guessing. So the mood shifts, not mystery solved, but mystery reframed. Because even if Antarctica isn't on the Piri Reis map, the map is still a remarkable object. It still raises questions that don't vanish. How did Piri Reis get such information so soon after Columbus? What exact sources did he have? How much came from Portuguese charts that were state secrets? How much was copied, traded, stolen, or captured at sea? We know that in the age of exploration, maps were weapons. Nations guarded them. Pirates seized them. diplomats bribed for them. The Mediterranean and Atlantic weren't just water, they were information networks. And there's another conflict hiding under the conflict. Mainstream explanations can sound like a dismissal. It's just distortion and speculation. But that doesn't fully satisfy you when you look at how knowledge moves. Real coastlines were being mapped rapidly. Ships were measuring, recording, correcting. Errors weren't just mistakes, they were the fingerprints of a process. When you see mismatched lines on old maps, you might be seeing the seams where different sources were stitched together. Yet alternative explanations also struggle. The leap from this coastline kind of matches to an advanced civilization mapped Antarctica in prehistory is enormous. It requires not just one unusual map, but a whole missing world of evidence. Tools, ports, settlements, a chain of transmission that survived catastrophes without leaving clear traces. It's not impossible in the abstract, but it's unsupported in the way science demands support. So you're left in a gray area that's actually more interesting than certainty. On one side, you have the human hunger for secret histories, for the idea that the past is deeper than textbooks. On the other, you have the messy reality of how maps were made. Partial reports, wrong calculations, copied coastlines, political propaganda, and blank spaces filled with educated guesses. And maybe that's the real Piri Reis puzzle. Not who mapped Antarctica, but why you want the answer to be extraordinary. Why a line on parchment can feel like an encrypted message from a forgotten intelligence. Because for a moment, it makes the world bigger. It makes history feel less like a straight road and more like a labyrinth. You can look at the Piri Reis map and see a mistake, or you can look at it and see a mirror. It reflects the edge of knowledge, where evidence ends and imagination begins, and it asks you to notice how easily your mind draws continents in the fog. And maybe that's the strangest part. The map doesn't just chart coastlines, it charts you. Because every age has its Terra Australis, a hidden land you're sure must exist, somewhere beyond the known world, waiting for your fears and hopes to give it a shape. And the question isn't whether someone mapped Antarctica before it froze. The question is what you're really searching for when you trace that shoreline with your finger and wonder what else might be buried under the ice of time.